you're seeing that. If you're not, certainly let me know. But I wanted to just try and give you a little background where some of this material comes from before I just give it to you. You're probably aware on some level that Arnold Schoenberg is credited with creating the system of 12 pitches, using 12 pitches in a real serialized kind of way. Serialized meaning that the notes are all occurring in a particular order. And I mean, he wasn't the only person to be dealing with this. As you can see, this guy, Matthias Hauer, was also working on something that he had a treatise of sorts come out clearly 4 years earlier than Schoenberg did. But Schoenberg was the one that got the notoriety for it, and not just him, but his followers as well. So Alban Berg and Webern and others that were part of that group. So this is around 1923, and so around 1933, Schoenberg flees, if you will, to Los Angeles. Now, he was actually in Boston for a short time before he actually made it out to Los Angeles, but by 1933, he was in Los Angeles, and people, started studying with him, film composers and things like that, even at that early time. Now, one of those people that studied with him was a guy by the name of George Tremblay. And George was a Canadian that had moved recently to LA. And he not only ended up being a student of Schoenberg's in Los Angeles, but he kind of became a disciple of sorts. I mean, he really, really, really believed in everything that Schoenberg was doing. But one thing that Tremblay lent to the whole thing was that he found a way, which we're going to talk about in a minute, but he found a way to take a 12 pitch group of notes, and he found ways to vary that mathematically. So
her family says she was taken to the hospital for doctors and
somebody's got their mic on, I think.
The baby is in the NICU doing well. Victor says the community is already reaching out with support. Some people.
Are we getting zoomed? I don't know here. Anyway, okay, so continuing on then, and so he found a way to take these rows and create variations of them.
Are you able to mute them, Jerry?
Has somebody got their microphone on?
I think it's Lori Dune.
Okay.
Victor says he now is helping the family get back on their.
One sec. Oh, there we go. Okay, cool. Thank you. Anyway, so Tremblay creates a book and creates a way to mathematically give us 144 forward variations of the original row. And of course, you've got the reverse versions of that as well, not to mention inversion and retrograde or reverse inversion as well. So, and that's not even talking about transposition yet, so he found a way mathematically to give us a lot more source material from just that one row. Anyway, one of George Tremblay's disciples, if you will, was a film composer and orchestrator by the name of Jack Smalley, who just passed away actually this past late December, and he was in his 90s. But I was lucky enough to study with him for quite a while when I was in Los Angeles, and that's where I first learned about these techniques. So it's some, interesting stuff, but I just wanted to give you a little backstory on some of this, so that you don't think I'm just coming out of thin air with it here. Now, so the first thing we want to do is find a way to create some source material. And so to do that, and you all can do this too. In fact, I'll post up these slides that we're looking at so that you can refer to them, at a later time if you like. But the idea here is we need to create a source row. And so a fun way to do that is using either your name or some other important word for you to do that. So let me show you how it works. The letters are of the alphabet, which is 26, but there's only 12 pitches. So with the letter J, if we look up here, we can see it's an A pitch. Okay. Now with the letter E, we go up here and we can see it's coincidentally an E pitch. An R, the letter R, we look here and it's an F pitch. But in my name, I've got two R's. So what we do then is we go up to the top of this pitch row and just find the first note that we come across that we haven't used yet. So we haven't used C natural yet. So I'm going to use that. Now we come up to a Y, and the Y up here says that we should use C, but we just use C. So we just go down to the next note, C sharp. And so we're going to fill in everything according to, these letter combinations with the pitch. So when we get to E again, we've already used the E pitch, but I just keep coming down and finding a pitch that hasn't been used yet. And I'm going to use D sharp or E flat, whichever you want to call it. It doesn't matter. And then when we get to G here, we see that the letter G takes an F sharp or G flat. Okay, the letter A, okay, we're back to C again, but of course we've already used that. So we're going to use D, a pitch that hasn't been used yet. When we get to the T, we're going to use G natural. When we get back to the E, another E, we're going to just keep going down to the next unused pitch. And at this point, it's G sharp or A flat. And then we get to the last letter of my name, S, and we look down here and it's an F sharp, but we've already used F sharp. So we just keep going down and the next unused note is B flat. And then finally, there's just one more note left. So that's going to be at the tail end, the B natural there. Okay. So first of all, then, are there any questions? I don't want to go any further. And, if there's any more, questions that I can answer there. Any questions?
Maybe a question I have is: are these the order of the letters is a random order, or you picked it because of a reason?
The reason is that it's my name. So but it doesn't
Yeah.
have, it could be, and to me, that's kind of random in terms of picking the pitches. Now, obviously the letters are not random. There's an order to the letters, but I didn't try to put notes next to each other or anything like that. That's just the way they came out based on my name.
Yeah,
But
I mean maybe like the A M Y with the C and then B and Z with C sharp. Like you just did A B C D in a vertical row and then kind of like random,
oh yeah. Well,
like in the
so
order.
right. So there's an order here. Okay. But there's another order we could use too. And that looks like this. And so the difference being here is, again, we know we need 26 letters. So we've got A, B, C, D, E, F, and then G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N until we get down to the bottom here. And when you use this ordering of letters, you're going to come up with a different idea. I mean, a different ordering of the notes using the same word or words to create it. So in this case, then the J right here is going to be a D sharp or E flat. The E is going to be C sharp or D flat. The R is going to be, here we go, G natural. And then again, we've already used G for this one. So we're going to go up to the top of the note row and grab this one. And so that's right there. And then the Y is right here. And that's a B natural. So we're going to put that in there. This next E right here is supposed to have a C sharp, right? But we've already used it. So we're going to just keep going down the row, look for the next unused note, which is the D. So I'm not planning on any of these notes being next to each other. Composers often put together orderings of pitches based on certain combinations of phrases and notes that they know will give them a certain sound. But in this case, I'm not, doing that at all. I'm, whoops, what's going on here? There we go. I'm just using a word like my name, and putting the pitches in order as they pop up. And so to me, the pitches are random, and that's the beauty of it, because I haven't given any thought to, how I want the notes to be together. So this can really yield some interesting surprises sometimes. All right. Does that answer your question? I hope so.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Okay, great. So here's the thing then. We've got two different rows created now, and they're both totally different from each other. But now I want to show you how we can use this in a real diatonic kind of setting, right? So here, I just decided to restrict the row. I decided to work in the key of G for whatever reason, or E minor. And so what I did is I just extracted the notes that were from this row, but in order of their appearance. So the first one's A, that's, like the number, the second degree of the G scale. The E is the sixth degree. C is the fourth. And F sharp is the seventh, of course. D is the fifth. G here, okay, is number 6. I'm just naming them. I'm just reordering the row because I'm going to work with them in a minute, and I want to keep it organized. This note here is going to be the last note in this order, but this is all a G scale right here, a G major scale, E minor scale, whichever way you want to look at it. Now, so we've grabbed 7 pitches in order from this row, and now I'm going to just kind of scrap those 5 other notes, because we know there's 12, but I'm going to scrap for the moment those other 5 notes and just work with these 7 right here. All right, so here, right here, then here's my restricted row. I've got 7 notes right here, all in order of how I pulled them out of the original row. And I just came up with a little melody. Okay, now notice that I didn't necessarily start on note number 1. I could have, but I actually started on note number 5 and started creating a little melodic idea. So here's a little phrase, and you can see the notes are 5, 6, 7, 1, 2. Now so I'm going 5, 6, 7, and then I cycled back around to 1 and 2. In the second measure here, it's pretty much the same kind of an idea, except for this time I took out the first note. I just made a little creative decision, which you can do, when you're working with this, and left out that first note. So now I had 5, 6, 7, 1, 2. Now I've got 6, 7, 1, 2. And I think you all know from, being writers that, this is a typical thing that you could do, to give a little variation to this original phrase. Over here, I did it again, except I put 2 eighth notes there instead of a dotted eighth and a 16th, but it's the same numbers. And then over here, I finally get completely around to notes 3 and 4. Now 3 and 4, as it turns out, C and F sharp, are the tritone for the key of G. And so that was automatically going to point me back to the beginning. So that actually worked out pretty well. I didn't have to do that, just the way it worked out. So I've got a little melody idea here, and I don't have any chords attached to it yet, but that's what's going to come up next. But let me play that actually. Let me play that for us so you can hear it's not anything that's going to win a Grammy yet, but it might. So here we go. Here's some audio here. All right, here we go. All right, so it's a very simple melody, nothing too exciting about it, but that's where our musicianship has to take over sometimes. So the next level of this then is to figure out a harmonization for it. And so here's the melody right up here. And so the first thing I'm going to do is just try a harmonization, just a free harmonization, just something, what's this melody suggesting to me? So a simple way to look at it would be to look at the pitches and see, oh, well, we can go G, like a 1 chord, going to a 4 chord, which is C because the E would fit in there. I could go back to 1 again and go back to 4 again. Again, just going back and forth between 1 and 4. And then here, I decided to go 2-5 to get me back to the beginning again. And the 2-5, of course, works with the C in the melody and the F sharp. Okay, so this here has nothing to do with the row. Nothing to do with the row. This is just thinking about a free-form harmonization that might work, something really simple. So here's what this sounds like then. All right, so that's pretty straight ahead. Pretty simple, and it might even work in some context. But let's actually take a look at another way to harmonize this thing. So, here's with the chords. So we can listen to this with full harmony because we are just listening to the bass and melody a minute ago. All right, so with the chords, it certainly sounds a little bit better. Anyway, but let's look at another way to harmonize this. What I would propose is to not only use the row to create a melodic idea, but let's also use the row to create some harmony and some sort of harmonic motion. So I had already decided on this dotted quarter eighth tide kind of an idea, so I'm going to stick with that. But here's what I decided to do. I decided I'm going to use my notes from my diatonic row. So I could have started with note number 1 because note number 1 would still work with this, but I decided to start with note number 6. And so I did. So that's a G there. And so we've got 6 going on to 7, the B. We know that this note would work. We could come up with a chord that's diatonic that would take care of both the B and the E. And then I cycled back around to 1 and we got the A and the E, and then the 3 note, the C natural there, and then the 4, the F sharp, and then 5. And I just decided to repeat the 5. So you can repeat notes. That's no problem. All right, so now, what does that sound like? It's going to be a little bit different than our 1 to 4 idea. So that would sound like this. Maybe. There we go. All right, so this is very different than that 1-4-1-4, but these notes are all diatonic to the key of G, as is the melody. So we should be able to come up with some sort of a chord progression that should work. So if we take a look here, the first chord here, looked like a G, so let's call it a G. But here on the and of beat 2, where I've got B, I could have called this G over B. I mean, there are other things I could have called it, but I decided to call it just an E minor 7, which is a 6 chord, over B, over its fifth. And that takes care of the B as well. Next thing here, I've got an A, and then these notes. So the A minor, a 2 chord, would definitely work there. Over here, I've got E in the bass now. I could have used, with that melody, I could have used the C chord. That would have been like a 4 chord. I could have used a C chord. I decided to call it E minor 7, just a straight up E minor 7. And then here we've got the C down below. So I decided to call it a C chord and filled in, the notes for that. And then here I called it an F sharp diminished 7. I could have called it maybe a D7 over F sharp, or a D9 over F sharp, taking into account the E there, and that would have worked perfectly fine. Here's a D7 sus for the D on the bottom and the C up here. It's just a common thing to go from D sus to D7. It's very poppy kind of thing. So I thought, okay, well, let's do that. Let's see what that sounds like. Okay, so that sounds like this. All right, so there's an idea that might work, but keep in mind, that we've got these bass notes are all diatonic to the key of G. So we don't have to start on note number 6. We could start anywhere in those 7 pitches. So another example of that then would be to go here. I'm starting on note 3. And going, let's see, 1 second here. Just need to check something really quick. Oh, there we go. Okay, that was the previous one. No problem there. Okay, so here then, we're going to start on note number 3. Previously, I started on note number 6, but this time I'm going to start on note number 3. Now, if these pitches are down here at the bottom, so I've got 3, I'm going to go to 4 next. I'm going to go to 5. I'm going to go to 6, go to 7, 1, and then cycle back around. Now, one thing I keep noticing here is that I start on a note and move to the right, but you don't have to. You could start on a note and move to the left, cycle back around. That's perfectly fine. So with this, then our first chord is C major 7, or C major 9. Actually, I threw in because the melody note's the D natural. D9 over F sharp, D7, E minor over G, E minor still, but over B now, A minor 7 with the A in the bass and the E on top, and then C. And then I played around with the bass a little bit here, or the bottom note, I should say, and then just went 1, 2, 3, and then just came back to 2 to end that. So that would all sound like this. All right, so that's, how we can just take a different bass note that's part of the row, and all of these chords are all totally diatonic to the G key or E minor. But the thing is here is that we're looking at it kind of random in a way. I mean, we're following the row, so that's not totally random, but I'm pretty sure that we might not have come up with this idea had I been sitting at the piano or the guitar, you know, whatever your harmony instrument is, and try to come up with a chord progression. Often, you know, we kind of get stuck. I know I did get stuck with this idea that everything's got to analyze. You know, I've got to find a way to make sure it analyzes, or it's not right. You know, but that didn't work very well for Stravinsky, and it wouldn't work very well for anybody using non-functional harmony, which is commonly used today. So, you know, right now everything's diatonic, but I'm not sure, you know, that we're really thinking about analyzing this the same way. Now, here's another possibility here. This is yet another version here. Now, instead of note 6 or note 3 to start on, I'm going to start on note number 7. That's a B natural. And I'm just going to follow it through. B natural, note number 7, cycle around to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 6, 7, cycling back around to 1. So I've already decided the harmony, the rhythmic idea behind the accompaniment, but I'm getting different chords because of the notes that I'm putting in the bottom. So here we've got we've got a B minor. Okay. Now the G doesn't fit neatly into every B minor, but it happens really quickly. So we don't really notice it as getting in the way. I mean, even down in the accompaniment here, we've got an F sharp where you could kind of say, well, yeah, but you've got a minor ninth interval there, you know, but it happens so quickly that you really don't notice it. And it goes to a really nice strong chord tone as well. So not a big issue. Over here, we've got note number 1, which was the A. So with the E again, A minor seems like a good bet. Right here, we've got note number 2, and this melody here fits nicely into E minor scale. Here we've got C in the bottom and E on top in the melody. So it seems like C major 9 would certainly work. It's like a 4 chord in G, of course. Here we got, I decided D over F sharp. I should have appropriately put D7 over F sharp because the C natural's there. And then over here, we've got a D9. It should be, well, it's root position there, so we're good. And then finally, I've got a C chord, and then going to a D9 over A. And that takes us back to the beginning again. Okay, so this one then is going to sound like. All right, so up to this point, any questions that you've got? Everybody following along okay? Any questions?
Yeah, Jerry, I just wanted to say this is excellent. I'm getting a lot out of this.
Well, good. I'm glad to hear that. The whole idea here, everybody, is not to try and convince you to do some other composing or harmony than what you've already done. It's really just to kind of give you more tools, because clearly when you're up against deadlines, it seems like you can't have enough tools. So the more ideas you can come up with, the better. The other thing I was going to also say is that we can use these kinds of techniques for different reasons too, and that is, Mark Costa, are you out there somewhere? Mark, are you there? Can you put your? Well, I wanted to ask you a question. So can you switch your mic on there for a second, or camera, or both, or whatever? He's in Australia, so it's morning for him right now.
Can you hear me, Jerry?
I can. Very good. Thank you, Mark. So, Mark, I have a question for you. Now, Mark's not a plant, but I'm going to ask him a question anyway. Mark, Mark's a great bass player and a very good writer in his own right as well. Now, if you are going to do a performance, let's say, let's say, for example, when you were doing Australian Idol and you were going to do one of those concerts or something, what would you be doing, maybe an hour before the show or at some point kind of leading up to the show? What would you be doing?
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Oh yeah, you're great.
Okay, great. Yeah. An hour before the show, probably starting to feel very nervous.
Okay.
Making sure that my equipment's working and that I know what I'm about to do. But yeah, just kind of mentally, just kind of getting myself in the zone, I suppose.
Okay. Now you're a bass player. Would you be kind of warming up on your bass at all?
Absolutely, yeah. I'd be warming up. I'd be sort of like going over what material I was about to play and just making sure that I was feeling comfortable and that I knew what I was going to do. So
okay, cool.
yeah.
So what I'm getting at, everybody, is that if we're going to do a performance of some sort, we're probably going to warm up a little bit, whether it's mentally warm up or physically warm up or both, probably. But when it comes to composing, we tend to just kind of sit down in front of our computer screens, I think, or piano, and pray that something comes out, and we haven't warmed up at all. So my point is that we can use some of these ideas that I'm presenting to you and going to present more. You can use some of these ideas to just kind of warm up the brain to the composing that you want to do. And then you'd be surprised once your brain gets in the flow of trying to be creative like that, then sometimes things happen a little bit more fluidly. At least that's been my experience. But I also know that often you just kind of sit down and don't know necessarily what you're going to do, but you hope that something comes out really good. So and sometimes it doesn't. Composing isn't like a situation where you can turn on and off like a faucet. It doesn't work like that. Often it doesn't. And I always like to use the analogy that sometimes composing is like pulling teeth without anesthesia. It can really hurt sometimes because just sitting there, and sometimes things just are not happening in a way that you're happy with. So sometimes these kinds of techniques can be used for just kind of warming up. So cool. So let's move on here. Here's another thing I did. Now, this is the same exact example, but what I did is I orchestrated it for strings. And here's what we did down below. Okay, so here's the piano stuff down below. But I decided to orchestrate it for English horn and strings. All right. And we can go on to the next page here. And, this is where, you take those pitches that you just created down below here, and you start trying to be creative in some way with them, so that's where dynamics come in. That's where, in this case, there's a little retard here, and there's a 5/4 bar, that wasn't originally down here in the sketch. A little accelerando. Here's a tempo here. These crescendos, decrescendos, that's all part of the creative process. And so the row was only being used to come up with this, little melody and then a bass line, So this particular one was, I think it was the last one, started on note number 7 to 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. So let me show you what that sounds like. Maybe. Oh, hold on. No wonder you're not hearing anything. I got to get us back on here. There we go. Okay, let me wind that back now that we got our audio and visual back. Here we go. So again, this is where, we're trying to be a little more creative. These are the pitches we came up with. And now we're adding crescendos, decrescendos, retards where you think they might go, accelerandos, tempo, all these things that are, not part of the process of the composition here. We just use the row to get the melody. We use the row to get the bass line, which in turn gave us harmony. But now it's been orchestrate it a little bit. So let's see what we have. All right, so we can, up here, here was the, you can see that in this first section here, I pretty much kept to the script up and through measure 3 here. But then when I got to measure 4, I actually took the melody up an octave from where it was and went up an octave to the F sharp. And I even put a little flourish on there to get me up to that F sharp, just a little scale oriented thing, nothing really difficult, but it adds a little more life to the whole thing. Down here, we can see that instead of down here, I went up and down. Here I went an octave higher down, and then like this, okay? And then here I actually took out the G natural, that was that 16th. And instead of going down to E, I went up to E. Over here, I kept it pretty much the same as it was down here. I take it back. The first beat is starting on the G again. I mean the D up high and then down. So there's a little bit of a difference there too. And then this C that was down here is up an octave. And then I ended it with this little extra note here as well. So, again, the row got us the basic melody, got us the basic chord progression, really. And then after that, we're done with the row. We're done with that restricted row. That just gave us something to work with, Now, let me show you one more example of this, which is maybe a little bit closer to an actual song. And here is where I decided that I was going to take my same row. This was the second version that we took. Yeah, this is the second version that we took. And what I decided to do is to make an A section that was going to be G minor. So that means I have to restrict this row to G minor. So I would take all the pitches here in order that are from G minor. So that's this. Okay, so the first note is E flat, got it. D flat isn't part of G minor, at least not this version. And then the third note here, G is, and again, I've just renumbered them 1 through 7 so I can work with them later. This note number 4 is a C natural, which is a part of G minor. So that's right there. And then B natural, of course, isn't part of G minor. The D natural is, though, so that shows up right here. The F natural, of course, is. A flat is not part of the minor that I want to use. So we're not going to use that. We're not going to use the G flat either, but we are going to use the A natural right there. And then we're going to use B flat also. All right, so actually, yeah, there should be a flat right there. We're missing a flat. Anyway, I put in the key signature at least to cover that there. Now, what I decided then is that the A section was going to be all G minor, but I wanted to go to a B section. And so I decided, okay, well, let's make it G major. So I'm going to restrict the same row to G major. So the first note that's part of G major is the G in this case. That's note number 3 there. The C is the next note. The B natural is the next note. The D natural is the next note. I'm going to use E natural. The F is not part of it. The A flat is not. The G flat or F sharp is, and the A natural is. This B flat wouldn't be part of G major. So look at this. I've got 2 orderings, 2 different orderings from the same row, and I'm going to use them to do some composition. So first I've got to create one of these sections. So I created this here. This is the A section. All right, and so we're good. Now, when we get here, I did a little cheating, kind of. When I got down here, everything follows pretty well. And when I got down here, I've got the repeat sign that I decided on. So I need to get back up here. And so it made sense to me to just jump to note number 6, because that was going to take me right to 7, just a half step motion. So that would work well. And then we repeat the whole thing. But when we get to the second ending here, this note 1 and 2 are still part of G minor. So there's note 1, note number 2. But then I need to cadence to G major. So at that point, I'm taking notes from the G major restriction, which gave me F sharp and then A and then 1 and 2. I mean, just going 6, 7, cycling around 1 to 2. And then that got me beautifully to the B natural. So the rest of this is all in, or this part of it, I should say, is in G major, just taking the notes as they occur, trying to come up with rhythms for them. And then when we get down here, I've got to get back to G minor. So I put in a D7 flat 9 idea, which just means I'm going to take the notes from G. And in this case, I took them from harmonic minor. And because I wanted some of what that would give me, the F sharp, the E flat, and then continue on to the last section here, which is now we're back in G minor again. And if we compare where pitches are and whatnot, you'll see that a lot of these pitches are up an octave from where they were originally, just to try and give some other perspective to it. If I'm putting this in a band or an orchestra, I would probably have this last section being played by, like violins up high or flute and woodwinds of some sort, just something to really bring this point home. So let's take a listen to this and then see if there's any questions from that. All right. Anybody have any questions? One thing I forgot to mention is that with the chord symbols here, these have nothing to do with the row. These are just random harmonization. I mean, everything is diatonic to G minor, but I didn't. They weren't derived from the row at all. The only thing that's derived from the row, of course, is the melody. and the usage of it. And in most cases, I mean, even here, 7, 6, 5, 4, 4, 3, and then 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. But I've moved octaves. You know, I haven't kept a literal repeat. I've changed a little bit to try and make some interest here. And then 4, 5, 6, 7, and then back down 6, 5, 4. They call this retrograde when you go reverse. 3, and then rested on 4, and then did a little jumping here, 1, 2, and then as I said earlier, this A was going to get me back nicely to B flat. So the thing again here is that, you know, we're using the numbers, we're using the row to the restricted row to give us some pitches, but you know, there's still a lot that we have to make up our mind about. You know, we still got to figure out the rhythms, and we've still got to, you know, figure out what direction we want the pitches to go, forward, backward, you know, um, those kinds of things. So there's still an awful lot of you know, creativity that needs to happen. Now, I'm not saying that this is necessarily creative, but I am saying that this is you know, something that you can get out of this, certainly. But shifting octaves around are a very craft oriented kind of thing. You know, I wouldn't call it art. I would just call it craft, you know, how to put together a really, you know, well thought out piece. Um, Coming up with the idea as to how you're going to do that might be the art part. But as you're actually assembling it, to me, is more about craft. You know, it's kind of interesting, just off the topic for a second, but actually related, is that you might all know who Steve Jobs was. Steve, I mean, if you look at your laptops, for example, you know, him and Steve Wozniak were the co-founders of Apple. And so, you know, we have a lot to be thankful for with that. But the thing that was kind of interesting about Steve is that he was an amazing idea guy. I'm reading a book, his biography right now, and uh, he was an amazing guy in terms of ideas, but he needed Steve Wozniak to actually put together the electronic parts and you know, really create what Jobs' vision was. And you know, that's really interesting. I mean, there's a lot of people out there that are just really great idea people, but they don't know how to really put it together. So you need somebody like Steve Wozniak's craft to put it together, but you also need the idea. And so in that case, you know, they were really you know, they lasted together for a little while as a team. But yeah, so it's just interesting. I mean, it happens in music, it happens in art in general, you know, where somebody's got a great idea, but they don't really know how to realize the idea. And sometimes we need to get other people involved, you know. It can be a very collaborative process for sure. Um, anyway, any questions about any of this? Okay, cool. So let's do this then. I want to talk about how we could use the row to harmonize a standard. All right. Or do we need a break? What do you guys want? I don't, it's fine with me either way. Do we continue on or do we take?
Jerry, I have to actually go to an office hour, but where can I find this recording? There's so much information in it. I'd love to be able to go back and reflect upon it.
Yeah, well, I'm going to be selling them for about $100 on eBay. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'll be putting them up. It'll be up on the CWP website for sure, but I'm going to probably post it on my Facebook as well as, or I'll put it on YouTube, my YouTube channel, but I'll, you know, alert everybody to that. But first of all, it'll definitely go up with the CWP website for sure.
Awesome. Jerry, thank you so much. I'm sorry that I have to go. I wish I could hear more. I look forward to hearing you speak in the future as well.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Have a good night now.
Thank you, Jerry.
Okay. So, Okay, well, let's continue on a little bit further then, since that seems to be where we're going to go. And okay, so what I want to do then is talk about how we can use a row to harmonize a tune. And you might be going, whoa, that sounds pretty weird. But it can be done, as you'll see in a second. Now, the this is the lead sheet. And you might recognize this if you've played Stella by Starlight. You know this tune. It's a um, Victor Young, but it's also it's a jazz standard. It's a great song, but I decided to make it ungreat, or take a shot at actually doing something reasonable to it. And so anyway, this is right out of the real book. So what I decided to do is, here's my row. This is row 1. This is my very first row that I showed you. And what I decided to do then is start with note number 6 in this case. So now we're using the whole row and nothing is restricted here. This is going off in a different direction here. So what I decided here, the melody note is A. Okay. And so I thought, well, I was kind of feeling like, the A could be like a Lydian kind of an idea. So on an E flat kind of a chord, this could be sharp 11 or flat 5 or something like that. So I was thinking, okay, well, let's start with E flat and just continue on and see what happens. So the next note I wanted to get to was D, but I had a G flat in the middle, or an F sharp. So what I decided to do is I wanted to stay in order. I didn't want to cheat, but what I did is I just made that note that I really didn't want, I made it really short. So the last 16th of beat 2. And so you'll notice that when you hear it, it just kind of goes by. You don't really notice any problems with it. And then, so we're at note 8, and then 9, 10, 11, 12. And then I cycled back around to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And, you have to still think about the rhythm. What rhythm do you want these pitches to be? And so you're playing the melody and you're trying to hear what the rhythm might be that you want as well. Now, when I got to the B section, I decided I wanted to do it just like the real book version, like this, Oh, you know what? I think we're not actually looking at the chart. My fault, folks. Somebody needs to speak up. It's the biggest problem with doing online stuff, is remember that you have to share it so that everybody can take part in it. So anyway, here's the Stella by Starlight, and these are the chords, the original chords. Now, here's my version of it, and again, I just need to put in these bass notes. So I decided to start with note number 6, which is the D sharp or E flat. And as I said, this G flat here I didn't really like, but I decided to get through it anyway and just make it really short. I could have even made it a grace note. I mean, I really could have, just to get to this D, which is where I really wanted to get. And then 9, 10, 11, 12, and then I cycled back around to 1 and 2. And then I even put a little rest there, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I'm back around to the beginning again, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So I just keep going. Now, when I got down here, here, the second 8-bar section of Stella, I decided that I wanted to keep it as the real book harmonization. So I wanted to kind of go back and forth. So that means that I'm going to keep this harmonization that's here, this harmonization. All right. So that's here. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to my 12-tone harmonization. And on note number 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then cycle back around to 12. So I'm going backward now. 10, 9, 8, 6. I skipped note number 7, which was the same problem I had earlier. And again, I could have made this a grace note or something, but I decided to use what would you call it, artistic choice and just dumped it completely, but then continued along. And this is where we end up here. Okay, so let me just play first of all the version with just the note, the bass notes and the melody, and then we'll talk about the harmonization of it, because that's where it can get really interesting, because you've got free choice to name those chords really anything you want. So here's this with just the bass then. All right, so by itself, with just the bass and the melody, there's definitely some spots that seem a little iffy, particularly like even right here. We've got an F natural down in the bottom with a G flat right above it. I mean, we're hearing that minor ninth interval right there. And so that sounds dissonant, B natural and F, there's a tritone there. So that sounds dissonant. And even these sevenths, A flat and G, B flat and A, those sound a little dissonant too. On the previous page, let's see. Oh, no, where was? Oh, right here. We've got the E natural down on the bottom with the F a minor ninth above, and so that's a dissonance. The thing is, though, is that this F has already been sounding for 2 beats before the E even happens. So that softens up the effect of the minor ninth. And, that's something to keep in mind if you want to try to mitigate or soften up the effect of the minor ninth. Just make one of the notes happen later. It's when you put them both together at the same exact time that you get, some issues that you may or may not like. But there might be a situation where you want that minor ninth because you're trying to use that dissonance. So let's see, what kind of ways that I decided to approach this. So my E flat down on the bottom here, like I said, it seemed like a good spot to think about Lydian, or like a major 7 sharp 11 idea, or a major 7 flat 5 idea, either way. And then here's that odd note, but there's the D I was trying to get to because I wanted the D minor. And then we're going G. So I call it G minor 9, A flat with the G, A flat major 9, A natural in the melody, B flat down below. So that seems like an obvious B flat major 9. B natural with the F. I decided to call that B major 9 flat 5. Blow it up a little bit here. And then C over A on beat 4 here. And then I've got, the way to take care of this is definitely to think dominant. So E7 flat 9. And so in here, someplace is going to have to be, the tritone, the G sharp and the D. It's going to have to be in here someplace to make that happen correctly. Otherwise, it sounds weird, just the E and the F there. Over here, yeah, I've got the F major 9 and the F. And then the C happens to be a fifth of that chord, so that works out nicely. The D flat and the F, well, D flat major will work. I put a lot of tension on these chords too, just to make them sound a little more contemporary. E flat with F natural, E flat major 9 will work fine. G flat and B flat, G flat major 9, and then G minor 9 on the D and the G, and then going back up again, A flat, B seemed to give me A flat major, B flat major, B7 flat 9 because of the C natural over here. And then I got into the harmonization from the real book. Whoops, sorry. The real book harmonization here. And that continues through here. And then down here, I just continued with the row. So E flat, A flat in the bottom, A flat major 9 seems like an easy idea. D7 flat 9 to take care of the D and the E flat. Then the G flat's like an F sharp, so that fits on this chord as well. E flat minor 9, going down to D flat, like the 7th. And then C minor here. These notes all fit C minor just fine. And then that continues through here. Now, one thing I've really avoided a lot of is dominant chords. I mean, there's some dominant chords here for sure, but I've made a point of trying to stay away from them because dominant chords point you in a direction because of the resolution of the tritone that wants to happen. It doesn't have to happen, but it wants to happen. So by staying with major and minor chords, it helps to keep that at a minimum, that issue at a minimum. And then this is similar to what we had in the very first 6 or 8 measures here. Okay, let's take a listen here. See what we come up with. I thought, let's see. Oh, here we go. So here's the chords. And you'll notice that there's a lot of voice leading going on here because that's definitely the way to make chords that aren't analyzed, as part of the same progression. That's the way to make them work next to each other is common tone or half step, whole step motion. It's when you have big leaps that the chords don't want to work too well together. Okay, so let's take a listen to this here then. All right. Any thoughts? Good or bad? Sounds like a no. Or you're all just floored by this profound awakening or something. Now, keep in mind that you don't necessarily come to what I came to with this reharmonization. You try a lot of things. All of these chord symbols that you see, they weren't necessarily arrived at in one pass through this thing. There was a lot of thinking about, well, do I want a flat 5 on that chord? What's that sound like? And the beauty of it is that I'm not a great piano player, so at least having the software, I think this was originally in Finale, I think. The software will allow you to at least get a sense of what you're creating. I wouldn't ever trust software completely because it often covers things up. And that's why I'm using specifically a piano sound here. It's more of a pure sound that way. And if there's any weird stuff going on, you'll more readily hear it. If I were to give this all to brass or strings or an orchestral thing, before I'm absolutely sure of what I want, it might cover up. Samples often cover up issues that live instruments won't. And so we, want to be careful about that. So I tend to use a piano sound pretty strictly for my composing until I'm ready to blow it up, to orchestrate it. At that point, then, I start using the sounds that I have and stuff. But for composing, pure piano sound. If it sounds good to you as a piano sound, it'll sound great with instruments. Real instruments or players. Yeah. So, okay. Let's see. Okay. Youngie, any kinds of questions that you have?
Actually, I have.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
I'm not sure. Just do we need to follow the chord progression stuff like when we use this technique?
In my case, what I was doing is here. Let me share the screen again. When I was coming up with these chords, I wasn't worrying about whether it analyzed or anything like that. I just wanted to try some different chords and see how they sounded. And again, the way you voice lead them really helps a lot to make it believable. This is what I would call non-functional harmony. In other words, one chord isn't functioning next to each other like a 2-5-1 or a 1-6-2-5. It's not functioning. You can't analyze it that way at all. But yet it still sounds okay. And the way that happens again is through a lot of voice leading and staying away from dominant chords. That's one way to do it for sure. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but did that help at all, or was that?
Yeah, I will try to think more about this.
Right.
I feel a little confused. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I think what you have to do is you start with the melody. You make sure you get the rhythm of the melody the way you want it. Okay. So let me just back up 1 second here. There we go. So if we look at this one here instead, let me blow it up. Oh, I think you can see it already. Okay. So, all right. So I figured out what my melody was going to be. And then I just kind of randomly picked the note to start on. In this case, though, like I said in the beginning, I picked 6 to start on because I was really hearing this major 7 sharp 11 idea that the melody would give me. And that's what made me want to start there. And then once I started there, so here's 6. I could have gone backward and then cycled around, but I decided to go 6 and go to the right. and then cycle back around. And so I'm putting notes here in the bottom part, and some of them, like we already said, don't really sound that great when you are just using the two notes. But when you actually put chord structures, it starts to work a little better for sure. But these chord symbols were all chosen just based on what they sounded like. I like this idea of going G minor, A flat, B flat. You know, it's a nice parallel kind of idea, and it gets me up to this B natural right here, in fact. But my problem when I got to the B natural is that F was my melody note. So I had to think of a chord that, you know, would work with that. It could have been something like a G7 over B. That would have done it for sure. It would have given a little bit different sound, but that could have worked also. So my bigger point maybe is that there are other chords that could have worked, even with these melody notes down here. But had I not started on note number 6 and started on note number 3 or note number 10 or any of those, it would have given me a totally different harmonization. And it's a fun kind of thing to do, is to, okay, we figured out the rhythms on these notes for starting on 6, you know, let's do a save as this document. And now let's start on note number 3, you know, and see what happens, see what kind of harmonization we came up with. And so there's some randomness to these chords, but yet I'm still relying on my ear to tell me whether I like this chord quality or not. You know, like right here with the G flat and the B flat. I could have called that G flat 7, you know, thinking like a dominant chord, because the G flat and the B flat would certainly both work for that. But I decided major because, again, I was trying to keep away from dominant chords unless I needed them for something. And even right here, where I chose the B7 flat 9, the reason why I chose the B7 9 was because my melody note was C natural and my bass note was going to be B natural. So the only way I could logically think that would work is, well, let's put a B7 flat 9 here. That will at least give me some sort of rational reason for the B natural and the C, and it would move by half step, the chord would, into the B flat major 7. So this kind of transition worked pretty well. So there was some thought to it right here, absolutely. But yeah, I think you just kind of dive in and see where it takes you. It was a lot of fun. There were a lot of spots where I came up with weird stuff and I'm thinking, nah, that doesn't work for me. So I'd come up with a different chord quality, and often that took care of it. Cool. All right. Now, there was one other thing I wanted to get to, if we want, if you're willing to hang in there. One more thing that I think might be really useful for us as well, and that is the idea of creating triads from the row to come up with chords. So let me show you how that works. Let me get rid of these, and I'll post all these examples again so that you can all get to them again. So here's the concept. We've got our 12 pitches again, and I've just kind of broken them up into groups of 3 because I want to come up with some triads. So if I take simply note 1, 2, 3 and put them here, this would give me the F, the A, and the E. So it'd give me the root, the 3rd, and the 7th of an F major 7 chord. Okay, well, that works okay so far. Now, the thing I'm being careful about here too is where I put the notes. So for example, if I put the E on the bottom instead of the F, that means the F would have to go above it someplace, and that would force me to have a minor ninth interval, which again, I'd have to think about, do I want an E7 flat 9 there or what, you know? So I put these back around so that F was on the bottom, gives me an F major 7, pretty stable kind of thing. Next here, we've got notes 4, 5, and 6. And again, you know, I'm going to have to order them, make a voicing that doesn't get me into any trouble, because again, if I put the C down below and D flat above it, then I've got that minor ninth interval that I'm trying to avoid. So I put the D flat on the bottom and the C and the E flat. This could be like a D flat major 9. You know, somebody else in the ensemble, whoever it is going to have to put in those notes, but at least it's possible. Over here, I've got these guys here. So we've got G natural, D natural, and G flat or F sharp. So I could call this like G flat major, I'm sorry, like a G major 7. So I got G, D, and G flat or F sharp. Somebody in the ensemble would have to put a B natural in, but you know, these notes will all go into that chord. Now over here, then we've got A flat, B flat, and B natural. So again, I'm going to try to find a way. I've got B natural here, and I'm going to put B flat up above it to avoid the minor ninth issue. And then the A flat, if it's a B chord, could act like a sixth, like a G sharp. So I think that could work there. All right. So that's going to sound very simply like this. Here we go. Sounds like this. All right, nothing too exciting there. One more time. Okay, so, you know, originally myself being a bass player, I'm always thinking about, oh, well, how can I use a bass line to connect these seemingly odd chords next to each other? And, you know, that's a great thing about that instrument. We can do a lot to connect the chords together just with the bass line. So here, taking these same triads, I'm going to go, and I'm calling it possibly F major 7 here. So I'm going to go F, A, C, which gets me, so it's just an arpeggio of F, but it's getting me up to the D flat very nicely. And then I let that go, and then down here, I've got G. My next target is the B natural over here. So I put the root there, and the next note, the ninth, skip the third up to the B, but it brings me beautifully down to the B natural, which is the root of this, possibly B major 13. Up above here, I've also created another line. While the bass is holding in measure 2, I'm creating forward motion with my top line. And you know, one thing that forces you to do this is if you don't have a rhythm section to work with, you know, like bass drums and at least piano or guitar, you really have to create the forward motion yourself with the voices that you're using. So that's what's happening here. So this E flat up to F gets us very nicely to the G flat. And then in the middle line, I created another idea to get me down to A flat. So I'm going D, or the fifth of the chord, down to B natural, down to A natural, which takes me beautifully to the A flat, which is the 13 of that chord. So just a little bit of motion here, and it makes it a little bit easier to get from chord to chord. So this one then is going to sound like this. again. All right, so just that little bit of adding on a couple notes here and there, mostly all very scale oriented. It definitely helps us get from measure to measure a little bit more easily. Certainly sounds better than, this thing right here. All right, so this is, again, non-functional harmony. We're not really going to analyze it as being part of the key of F, that's for sure. None of this would be part of the key of F. In fact, yeah, but it still sounds okay, when you start adding some other things. Now, here's the problem though. This is just one row and you've got, 3 triads there, okay? But let's try and blow that up into more like a song. So, going here. So I'm extending this out a little bit here now. And what I've done here is I've come up with another way to make triads. So I'll blow this up a little bit here. I'm going to use notes 1, 2, and 3. And then I'm going to use notes 2, 3, and 4. So I'm still using notes 2 and 3 in measure 2, but I'm going to add a new note, and that's going to be 4. Next measure over here, I'm going to retain notes 3 and 4, but I'm going to add one new one, 5. So I'm continually keeping triads going, and only one note of the structure is moving or being added new. In every measure, we've only got one new note. But you can imagine that that one new note can really change what the whole thing sounds like. So over here in measure 4, then we're using notes 4, 5, and 6. 4 and 5 were used in the previous measure, but we're going to add 6. And I keep going through that process until I get to the end here at measure 12, where I've cycled all the way around notes 12, 1, and 2. And if I were to put in another measure there, I'd be back around to notes 1, 2, and 3. These notes right here. All right, so I've got a progression here. The problem with it is that it's 12 measures, but let's listen to that first before we make any rash judgments here. All right, so I don't know about you, but I think I've just been living in this 8-measure verse chorus world so long that I really felt like when we got here to the end, I still wanted to hear 4 more measures. I really did. So what I did is I ended up taking these first 4 measures and pasting them on the end here to see what that would sound like. So that ended up looking like this. And yeah, so here's where I added it on. So this is our 12th measure right here. And then I add 4 more from there. Now, you might be thinking that, because I was too, thinking that, well, these 4 measures tacked on are the same 4 measures that were right there. It's going to sound like we went back to the beginning. But it really doesn't, because it seems like this 4 measures here is so strong that we want to hear 4 more measures. And I found that to be really, really interesting. But let's listen to what that sounds like right there. These repeats just mean that it would be logical to go back to the beginning before you went any further, probably. But it was just an idea. So let's hear what that sounds like. All right. So what I also did is right here, the voicing is the same as there, but down here I changed the voicing a little bit. I moved the bottom voice down an octave. Same thing there. Same thing there. And again, it didn't really make me feel like it was going back to the beginning. Now, the next thing after that then is just to start thinking about chord symbols, of course. So that's this one here, I believe. Nope, not that one. It's this one. There we go. So here I'm thinking about, well, what notes could these chords be part of? So that's where I start coming up with these ideas. These are the chords that I chose. And the other thing that I did at this next iteration is I came up with a melody. Now the melody doesn't have anything to do with the row. The only thing we've used the row for is to get these triads in some sort of an order. That's all we've done. We have not used the row for anything else. So this is a free melody. This is totally, whatever you would want to put there as a melody, but the chords are the same. So let's see what we've got here then. All right, so it's just a free melody. It could be in so many different possibilities for a melody. That's just what I came up with. Now, the next thing after that then would be to think about form. So I've got chords, got chord symbols. Need to think about form. And for me, since these chords are, fairly non-functional, I figured, well, we've got this melody. Let's go back and repeat it again. So these 8 measures are going to give me A and then another A. And then this is clearly different than that. So this will be B. So I got A, and B. And it would look like this. And so I've got my repeat bars in there. And let's see if I can make this a little bigger here. There we go. So again, you can see all the notes we use for the chords. I've got my melody in here now, and I figured out a form. A, B. And then I'll come back around for A perhaps. All right, so let's hear what that sounds like. All right. So now we've at least got some form. I mean, if I were to use this for, say, a chamber group or something like that, then I'd have to get to work and really start providing some forward motion in these voices, because right now they're just kind of sitting there. And the only thing that's keeping us going from measure to measure is really the melody. So what I decided after that then is, well, let's see if what happens if I put a rhythm section idea to it. So that's what I did. So now we've got, again, we'd already decided on our chord symbols. So again, we're done with the row. So I came up with a little groove. They call it a samba canção. So it's like a really slow samba. And so the bass line ends up being primarily roots and fifths. And I've got a little comping part for the piano. And it follows the form I had already come up with. And so that works. I put a little, I think, see, I've got a piano there. I think I put a flute on that top voice, if I remember right. Let's find out. All right. And, again, if you put live players on just these four parts, it would sound one heck of a lot better. Certainly. I mean, the bass player would be putting in little notes, drums would be certainly putting in other things to make it really flow. Same with the comping. The comping wouldn't be just this. And maybe even the flute player would be embellishing the melody a little bit, and we can do that to a degree, with our samples, but it definitely takes a lot of editing and a lot of work to do that, So I don't know. I prefer live players, that's for sure. But there's certainly a place, for samples and electronic stuff for sure. But yeah. So any questions anybody's got? Does anybody have, I should say?
Hi.
Yes.
Yeah. Just turn on my mic a bit. So like the technique you use, like for three notes, you can create a chord, right?
Right.
Yeah. For me, it sounds to me, because the first time you play those three notes, it sounds to me like some kind of chord, because the intervals and those specific intervals create the tension, and like the guide tone or the tensions there. So is that a way to you consider about what chord it is?
Yeah, for me, I was just looking at the three notes, the triads, and just thinking about, well, what chord do I want this to fit into? Because there's often more than one answer. It's just that you're right, those three notes can sometimes create their own tension, and sometimes it'll be really, really obvious what they should go into. So, for example, if I share the screen here again, um, when we came up with this idea of, I think it was F, A, and E, I think were the notes. I mean, it just seemed really obvious that that must be an F major 7. It just seemed obvious to me. And then when the next note was C, well, that's the 5th of the A, so that, seemed to make sense that it would go there next. And then as a bass player, it's connecting up, in this case, C, D, going to D flat next, and trying to connect those kinds of things up. But you're right. Sometimes it's not so obvious, but you still have to think about what notes can go into what chord stack. And that's why I think it's really, really important to know what notes go into a chord stack. And a chord stack being all the notes that are in a scale, but putting them vertically instead of horizontally. So, like on a C scale, we would go C, E, G, B, D, F, or F sharp maybe even, G, and A, right? So we'd line those up in thirds essentially, but then you start looking inside and seeing all the triads that are inside. There's a lot of triads inside those chord stacks. So it really kind of gets fun when you've got a chord symbol and maybe you've got 3 horns that you want to write a harmony for. Well, if you've got a jazz style or something that will allow more complex harmony, you could give your 3 horns, B, D, and F sharp, while the rest of the band is playing C major, but yet you're using the 7th, the 9th, and the sharp 11, and that's implying a larger chord form. Now, you're not going to do that with triadic styles, things like rock or other ethnic styles, because it won't quite fit. But certainly anything that has a jazz kind of a harmony to it, or something more complex than that, it'll definitely work. And it's really kind of fun, actually, to find out some of those things for sure.
Yeah, and for me, it still sounds like tonal. It's not atonal.
And that's the beauty of it too, is that it does not sound like Schoenberg. It doesn't sound 12 tone. Nobody's going to listen to this and say, oh, that's 12 tone, because 12 tone, it seems to me, when you say that word 12 tone, it's almost like some sort of obscene or dirty word that you said, because it's 12 tone as a style is thought of as being historic. In other words, it's old and people don't use it anymore. Well, that's crazy. It just doesn't sound like the old 12 tone, that's all. But we're still using those 12 pitches for sources. And that's, above everything, what I'm trying to show here is that, we can use these 12 pitches in different ways. We still have to be creative, but we have to come up, we have to think of the rhythms, we have to think of the form, the orchestration, all that we still have to think about. But the 12 tones can give us some direction for sure.
Yeah, that's very inspiring, because when like I'm doing writing a song, making arrangement, I just think of the sound that I heard or something, like, yeah, very obvious. But using this technique, I think, yeah, you can create something that is unexpected, because you never know what's gonna happen with those notes.
Right. That's true. That's cool. Um, and I'm glad you're finding it interesting, because that's, it's, are you in contemporary writing production,
Yeah,
Daniel?
yeah,
Okay. I mean, I will admit that in that major, we don't really discuss enough composition. It seems to be, obviously there's a big emphasis, and there needs to be, on the technology, absolutely. And there's also an emphasis on, creating a lot of electronic things. I mean, really almost teaching you how to be an engineer, you know, uh, as much as a writer, because we really need to know that today too. I mean, I was at a Zoom cast with I'm trying to. Oh, it was the Snarky Puppy. That band was a big Zoomcast with a whole band part of the Zoomcast. And one thing that they were talking about was how, as writers and even players, it's really, really incumbent on us to understand and be able to use the technology, because I think, and they thought too, that once this COVID virus is gone, we're not just all of a sudden going to go back to the way it was. We're still going to have to be working like this remotely, just to be able to, be able to work with, if I want to work with my friend Lek, who's trying to get on right now, and he's over in Switzerland right now. If I want to work with him, if I want his beautiful bass to be on my session, then we're going to have to work remotely, because chances are there won't be a budget for me to go to Switzerland and for him to come here. So we can still work this way. And to be honest, this isn't a new thing, working remotely. I mean, we've been doing this now, oh God, since at least 2008 that I'm aware of. But it's here at the college, and as individual composers, we're kind of getting forced into it now because of COVID. I mean, I love playing with live musicians, but there's times when you can't, due to either economy. There's no budget to go fly wherever that person is. Those days are kind of gone for a while, I think. So this remote thing, we've just got to get used to it. And the idea was that Snarky Puppy was talking about, is that you just have to have a good microphone, be aware of how to use Logic, or Pro Tools, or Cubase, or what else, whatever DAW you can think of. But you need to be able to put together tracks kind of quick from your own little project studio, and I feel like everybody's got that now. They really do. So yeah, some cool stuff there. Yeah. Any other questions? All right, cool. Well, thanks for hanging out, everybody. I'm going to post this up. It'll be in the CWP website probably tomorrow or so. I'll get a Zoom link probably in the next hour or so, and then it'll go into the department link, and then I'll probably also be putting it up on my Facebook, or or on my YouTube page. So one way or the other. But it's been great having you guys around. Any last questions before we sign off?
Just personal question. You are teaching what classes? Maybe I can choose.
Actually, next semester I'm teaching a class in 12-tone stuff that we're going. It's CW 255, and it's a specified elective, I think, and so we'll be touching on this, as well as a whole bunch of other different ways to use 12-tone as well. So that's for the spring, starting in late January.
Yeah, sure. I'll check this out.
Okay, great. Young guy, any other questions or thoughts? Great. I know I'm pronouncing your name totally wrong. I know. I'm sorry. But anyway, well, thank you very much for hanging in there, both of you. So have a good evening or a day wherever you are. And certainly if you have any questions about anything, feel free to send it back. If you want, my email address is just simply jgates@berkeley.edu. If you want me to send you any of these materials so that you have them for yourself to be able to look at more closely, just send me an email and I'll be happy to send them to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, you're very welcome. Questions anytime, though, no problem. All right, have a good evening or a day, as I said, and we'll talk to you again soon. Take care now. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.